All right, today's classroom lesson is going to be run by my good friend and fellow Heads Up Sit and Go Grinder Rolinas. So I'd like to extend a big thank you for helping out with this pack, and I'll pass it over to him now.
Hello, Rolinas here, and today I will talk about playing Postflop while being out of position. These are very basic guidelines heavily focused on playing fish and randoms at lower stakes. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about preflop tendencies, and that leads to postflop adjustments. And then I'll be talking about playing postflop in limped pots, raised pots, and free-bet pots. And I also will be talking about semi-bluffing and bluffing throughout the whole presentation. So preflop tendencies actually have very huge impact on how we can adjust to our villain postflop. Those preflop ranges and postflop ranges are directly related, and the rule here is that the wider preflop raising range your opponent has, the weaker it is postflop. And we can exploit that by relying on our HUD stats like PFR, CBET, limb percentage, and limb call percentage. So basically, first hands tell you what kind of opponent you're playing. So if you're, let's say your opponent started the match very aggressively and raised all 3 or 4 buttons, and you called with something like suited connectors or king high, and you missed, but you missed all flops completely, and he took them down with continuation bets. So you already have to be thinking that it's pretty hard to get decent hands pre-flop, and he only hits 1/3 of the flops. So what you can do post-flop is to think if the board hit wide pre-flop raising range. For example, if the board comes very dry, like king 7-2 rainbow, and he c-bets again, you can check raise bluff with pretty much any 2 cards. Or you can check raise lower boards like 6-3-2, because it's not likely to hit his range either. If you actually get a hole here, the turn card will often be good for you to barrel, because it's more likely to be higher than 6 or 7. Also, a lot of interesting situation comes up when your opponent starts a match passively by limping and calling. This should tell you that your opponent is more on the passive side and probably won't be bluffing that much post-flop. Also, he won't be willing to fold his mediocre holdings, so you have to be aware of that. Okay, playing in nymphos. Well, in general, you want to be thinking about how often a player limps, or if he was raising and now all of a sudden he decided to limp, or he was mixing it up, likely heavily based on his hand strength. So basically, game dynamics matters much more when stacks decrease, because it's less likely that fish limps his top hands 25 big blinds deep. Although it happens, it's just not very often. So versus fish or random guys, a lot of the times you can take initiative post-flop. For example, if he limps and you check and the pot now is 40 chips, and the flop comes 6-6-2, or like king 4-2 rainbow, or ace 9-5 all clubs, and you have something like 7-3 of spades. Well, you can just lead out here like 30 chips, and if you do that already, it's awesome, but if not, you'll be surprised how often fish falls in these spots. You can lead on these flops with any 2 cards and continue to do that till your villain starts adjusting. You can also lead here with bottom or middle pairs on low boards if your opponent only plays when he has a decent hand, like a pair or a draw. If you flop top pair, however, you can lead if the board is pretty draw heavy, like 9-8-5 with the flush draw. You want to protect your hand and don't give up any free cards. But if the board is more like queen 7-3 rainbow and you have a queen X, you might want to check and let the opponent do the betting for you. So you can check raise or slow play. That depends on how often your villain is likely to be betting multiple streets with bluffs or marginal hands that you have beat. Now, when the stacks get shorter, in general, you want to play your main hands or draws fast, especially if your villain has wide limping range, like he was limping a lot of hands earlier. which means going post-flop, his range will be not that strong. And when effective stacks are like 8 or 12 big blinds deep, if you flop top pair, like say you have 6-5 offsuit and the board comes 6-3-2 or something like that, I tend to just check overbet shove the flop, because a lot of bad players in this case will call you off very light, even with no pair hands sometimes. And of course, you might run into aces or kings from time to time, but you're not going anywhere with your hand at this point. So you can check shove here and get villain to fold a lot. And by doing that, we will gain like 3 big blinds without shoving our hand. But it works only if he bets the flop. Now, if he doesn't bet the flop, let's use the same example. When you have 6-5 offsuit on 6-3-2 board, you need to reevaluate the turn. If the turn card comes something like 8 or 9, and you don't think that it could connect with his limping range, you can bet for value. And if he raises you on that card that shouldn't help him in general, he probably has it. Now, if the turn card comes like ace, king, or queen, you may want to check and let him represent those hands, and he will not have them every time, so you can easily bluff catch. But you need to be aware of those things when you go to the river. So let's say when the turn was 8 or 9 and he called your turn bet, at this point you probably don't want to be betting any rivers unless you improve to trips or straights or 2-pair. Because villain is not going to call you with many worded hands, there's just simply not enough of them. And of course, he can have ace or king high, but he's not calling with them on the river. So if the river, for example, pairs the board, like the river comes 8 or 9, he's less likely to have trips and more likely to call you with ace king high if you bet the right amount. So basically, you want to underbet when you think that your villain range is most likely weak shoulder hands that he can call your bet, and you want to overbet when you think his range is strong, but you probably have the stronger made hand.